The morning fog was a thick, silver blanket clinging to the jagged peaks of the Scottish Highlands, a world away from the sun-drenched valley I'd left behind. My breath plumed in the cold air as I stood on the damp moor, a steaming mug of tea warming my gloved hands. Before me, nestled in a sheltered glen, was Dunod House. I had bought the ancient estate sight unseen, a whim born of a deep-seated need to escape the noise and the relentless public eye of my life in London. The estate was my sanctuary, a place of peace and a chance to finally, truly be alone. This morning, however, my solitude was being challenged by a woman standing on the edge of my property, a stark figure in a brightly colored ski jacket. She was shouting into a mobile phone, her voice a sharp, intrusive sound that sliced through the quiet, and she was pointing directly at me. Her gestures were wild and furious, as if I were a poacher on her family's ancestral land. She didn't know this sprawling estate was mine, every stone wall and every mossy acre. She didn't know that the rustic, stone-built cabin she was demanding to use was part of a centuries-old inheritance dispute, and that my ownership was a secret that would soon be revealed with a force colder and more chilling than the Highland mist. "I'm calling the police," she yelled, her voice carrying on the wind. "You can't just stand there like a ghost on private land." By the time the constables arrived, the truth would be as solid and unforgiving as the granite mountain surrounding us. The day had started so quietly. I'd had my usual Earl Grey tea, watching the red deer graze on the distant hillsides, leaning on the rough, lichen-covered stone wall of the old manor house. That's when I saw her. A woman in a fluorescent pink ski jacket and an oversized plaid hat came striding up the winding path that led from the main road. She moved with an air of absolute authority, as if she were a long-lost royal surveying her kingdom. She didn't glance at the private estate signs I had posted. She didn't even hesitate. She walked directly to the small, beautifully restored stone cabin that sat near a stream, a cabin I had been meticulously renovating for months. She tossed her rucksack onto a bench and began yelling, "Hello. Is anyone here? The cabin is ours for the week." I set my mug down on the wall and walked over. I had dealt with entitled tourists before, but there was something about her brazenness that set my jaw. "Ma'am," I said, my voice as calm as the loch water. "This is a private estate. That cabin is not available to the public." She spun around, a hand on her hip, her expression a mix of disbelief and annoyance. "Don't be ridiculous. I am part of the clan association, and we have a standing reservation for this cabin. It's a shared resource." I stared at her for a second, half tempted to laugh. "I'm not being ridiculous. I'm telling you, this entire estate is mine. I purchased it. I live here. The clan association has no claim here." For a moment, she just stood there, her mouth open as if she couldn't comprehend being told no. Then her face twisted into a look of pure entitlement I had seen many times before. "You'll regret this," she snapped, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the authorities. Let's see what they have to say when they get here." I stayed where I was. I'd learned long ago that you don't back down from people like her. If you do, they'll simply walk all over you. I leaned against the moss-covered wall, watching her bark into her phone. The cabin behind me, with its small, smoke-curling chimney, was more than just a building. It was the first piece of this ancient land I had restored with my own hands. I had come to Scotland 2 years ago, and this estate was just a forgotten ruin, a half-broken castle with overgrown gardens and a derelict manor house. I had worked day and night to turn it into something worth living in. I hauled stone, rebuilt walls, and cleared every overgrown path. I had poured my savings and my sweat into this place. This estate wasn't just mine on paper, it was mine in every sense of the word. And I wasn't about to let some self-important tourist stomp all over it. Minutes later, the low rumble of a Land Rover broke the silence. A local constable's cruiser rolled up, its blue light catching the pale morning sun. The woman smirked like she had already won. "You're in trouble now," she muttered. The constable, a tall man with a calm, measured expression, stepped out. He looked from her to me, one eyebrow raised. "We got a call about a dispute over property access," he said. "Ma'am, is this the man refusing you access?" "Yes," she said, almost shouting. "This man is blocking me from using the community cabin. He has no right to do that." I kept my tone even. "Constable, this isn't a community cabin. It's part of my private estate. I can show you the deed." She scoffed. "He's lying. He's just some stubborn man who thinks he can keep everything to himself." The constable looked at me. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" "I do," I said. I walked into the manor and came back with a folder thick with papers, property deeds, a surveyor's map, and tax records. I laid them out on the stone wall for the constable to see. "I bought the entire estate 2 years ago," I explained. "The clan association's land ends a mile down the road. Everything here, the manor, the gardens, the trails, and this cabin, belongs to me. The clan has no claim here." The constable took his time reviewing the documents. Finally, he nodded. "Looks like he's telling the truth, ma'am." Her face went from red to a furious shade of purple. "That can't be right," she cried. "We use this place all the time." I shook my head. "You use the clan's lodge and the public walking trails. This is private land. I don't take clan fees, and I don't answer to them. You're trespassing. You can't do this," she spat, grabbing her rucksack. "You'll regret this. I know people. You have no idea who you're dealing with." She stomped off to her car. Gravel kicked up behind her as she sped away. Something told me she wasn't finished. People like her never stop at one defeat. As the cruiser rolled away, I turned back toward the cabin. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. I leaned on the wall, sipping the last of my tea, and let the quiet settle around me again. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. This woman had the look of someone who would go to war just to prove a point. If she wanted a fight, I was ready. I'd worked too hard to let someone like her push me off what I owned. And as I looked out across the misty glen, I swore to myself I'd make sure she learned exactly who she was dealing with. After her car disappeared, I stood there for a while, staring at the peaceful glen. For most people, a remote estate in the Highlands is a fantasy, but for me, it was the heart of my life, proof that I had taken a wild stretch of land and a crumbling ruin and turned them into a sanctuary. I ran my hand along the rough stone wall I'd built myself, every mortar joint laid with my own calloused hands, and the memories came flooding back. I had first come to this glen nearly 3 years ago. Back then, it was nothing more than a forgotten patch of land with a half-collapsed castle that looked like it might crumble with the next big storm. There was a derelict manor house, a well that hadn't drawn clean water in decades, and acres of rocky, unforgiving ground that no one had wanted to tame. But I saw something in it. A chance to build a place where I could breathe, a place that belonged to no one but me, a place to heal from a life spent in the relentless glare of the public eye. I had worked through the brutal winters and the damp, foggy nights, often sleeping in my truck because the manor house roof was too rotten to trust. I had hauled stone in my old Land Rover, mixing mortar by hand when I couldn't afford a proper mixer. Every payday from my consulting jobs went straight into this land. Little by little, the estate started to change. I repaired the manor house, built a new barn, and cleared out paths that had been overgrown for centuries. The cabin came later, a small, cozy retreat I built from the ground up, and it felt like a crown on everything I had built. It was my way of saying I had made it, of carving out a life that no one could take from me. I used natural stone from the nearby stream for the walls, set up a slate roof, and planted new pine trees for shade. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every time I walked out there and saw the smoke curling from the chimney, I felt a peace that no city or corporation could ever give me. The estate wasn't just a manor and a cabin anymore. Over time, I added 3 small guest cottages for friends and family, a workshop where I built furniture from the wood I harvested, and a fire pit big enough for a dozen folks to sit around. My nearest neighbor was miles down the winding road, and that was just how I liked it. No noise, no busybodies, and no one trying to tell me what to do with my own land. But then the clan association started encroaching. A few years ago, a new visitors center and a small resort popped up near the southern edge of my property. At first, I didn't think much of it. They built their tidy buildings and manicured lawns, and I stayed up here on my moor, minding my own business. But soon enough, I started hearing stories about this clan association, their endless rules about who could use which walking paths and who had access to the community facilities they built. I wanted no part of it. The problem was, some of the new tourists and members didn't understand where the association's land ended and my estate began. They'd drive up here thinking my property was just another part of their community. I had to put up signs, private estate and no trespassing. But that didn't stop everyone. And then came this woman, a tourist I now knew as Morag. She wasn't the first one to mistake my cabin for something she had rights to, but she was by far the loudest and most entitled. I couldn't help but shake my head as I thought about her threatening to make me regret it. People like her believe they can bully their way through life. But I've spent too many years fighting for every inch of this land to be pushed around now. I've fought brutal storms, stubborn rock, and long nights. One angry tourist wasn't going to scare me off. After the constable left, I spent the rest of the morning working on the estate. I fixed a loose gate on the barn, chopped some firewood, and checked the stone walls. These small chores keep the place alive. They also remind me why I love this life, because it's honest. Out here, you get exactly what you work for. There are no shortcuts, no committees, no rules telling you what to do. Just hard work and the quiet satisfaction of seeing the results. By midday, a light rain began to fall, and I sat under the shelter of the manor house's archway, drinking a cold glass of water. I knew Morag wasn't done. People like her don't just storm off and forget. She'd be back, and next time she'd probably bring back up, maybe her clan association board or even a lawyer. That thought didn't scare me. In fact, it made me smirk a little, because if they wanted a fight, I had the one thing they didn't, ironclad proof that this estate was mine, and no clan rule book could touch it. I pulled the property folder out again, flipping through the old maps and deeds. The original boundaries of this land stretched farther than most people realized. My grandfather, a man I never knew, used to say, when you own something, make sure you know every inch of it. I did, and I was ready to show anyone who questioned it just how deep those boundaries went. As the fog dipped lower, I stood and looked across the glen. The manor house glowed in the soft light, and the cabin's chimney sent a thin plume of smoke into the sky. This was my sanctuary, my retreat from a world that always seemed to be rushing and arguing. If Morag thought she could barge in and claim a piece of it, she was in for a rude awakening. The day after Morag's outburst, I woke to the low rumble of a vehicle on my gravel road again. For a moment, I thought she had returned, but when I looked out the window, it was a different car, a pristine black SUV with the emblem of the clan association on the door. It rolled to a stop near the cabin, and 2 men stepped out. They were wearing expensive tweed jackets with the clan logo stitched on the lapels. So Morag had already called in reinforcements. I grabbed my rain jacket and walked out to meet them, my boots sinking slightly into the soft moorland. "Good morning," I said evenly, leaning against the fence. "Something I can help you with?" The taller one, a man with a perfectly trimmed beard, cleared his throat. "Sir, we're with the Clan McTavish Association. We understand there was a misunderstanding yesterday with one of our members. We're here to resolve it." "Misunderstanding?" I raised an eyebrow. "Your member trespassed on my property, screamed at me, and called the police. That's not a misunderstanding. That's harassment." The second man, younger and more nervous looking, tried to smile. What my colleague means is, this cabin has been used by the community for years. We thought it was part of the association grounds. I shook my head slowly, keeping my tone calm but firm. You thought wrong. This entire estate, the manor, the cabin, and every square inch of land you see here, is mine, bought and paid for. Your association's land stops a mile south of here. I don't answer to your board or your fees. The older man frowned. Sir, this area has always been open to members. Are you sure you have the proper documents to prove ownership? I stepped closer, pulling the folder of deeds and maps I had tucked under my arm. I'm more than sure. Would you like to see the original purchase contract, the tax records, or the county surveyor's map? Take your pick. I've got them all right here. They glanced at each other, clearly realizing this wasn't going the way they had planned. I laid the documents on the fence post, flipping to the official property map with the county seal. See this line? I pointed to a bold line on the map. That's where your association's land ends. Everything north of this ridge is mine. This cabin was built on my land with my money, and I've maintained it without a single pence from your association's funds. The younger man's face flushed. Well, perhaps we should have double-checked the boundaries. The older one didn't give up so easily. We can still come to an agreement. Perhaps we can draw up some kind of shared access contract. I cut him off. Not happening. I built this place for peace and quiet, not for association drama. I'm not signing anything. Tell your members to stay off my property, or the constable will be the one giving warnings next time. For a moment, they just stood there, clearly unused to someone standing up to them. Clan associations thrive on intimidation, on scaring people into compliance with threats of fines and rules. But I wasn't one of their suburban homeowners. I had carved this place out of the wild with my own hands. They couldn't bully me. Very well, the older man said finally, his tone stiff. We'll discuss this with the board. You do that, I replied. And tell Morag to stay off my land. She's not welcome here. They left without another word, their SUV kicking up mud as it rolled back down the hill. I stood by the fence, watching them disappear, feeling the tension rise in my gut. Something told me this wasn't the end. Morag didn't strike me as the kind of person to let go of her false sense of power. And now she had her board involved. I could almost hear her plotting her next move. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the hills in gold, I sat on my porch, thinking about what might come next. If they wanted to make this a fight, I'd be ready. I started gathering every document I had, purchase receipts, county records, even photos of me rebuilding the cabin years ago. I stacked them in a neat pile on my kitchen table. I wasn't just going to defend what was mine, I was going to make sure they never tried this stunt again. Later that night, I heard a truck slow down on the gravel road. I stepped outside with a lantern just in time to see a note pinned to my front gate. It was written in bold, scrawling handwriting, "This isn't over. You can't keep us out forever." There was no signature, but I didn't need one to know who it came from. Morag's pride wouldn't let her walk away quietly. I pulled the note off the gate and crumpled it in my fist. "We'll see about that," I muttered under my breath. The glen was quiet again, but I knew it was just the calm before the storm. Tomorrow, I'd head into town to speak with the constable directly. If Morag and her clan board wanted to test me, I'd be ready with the law and the truth on my side. By the third day, Morag was back. And this time, she didn't come alone. I was patching a stone wall near the barn when I heard the sound of engines grinding up my gravel driveway. I looked up and saw a convoy of cars. 3 of them pulling up near the cabin area. Out stepped Morag in a wide-brimmed hat, her ski jacket covered with a loud floral wrap. Behind her came a group of 4 other clan members, all dressed like they were headed to a board meeting rather than someone else's property. She marched right up to the gate, her voice already sharp and full of venom. You can't block us from using this cabin, she declared. We've talked to our board, and we've decided that you've been unfairly keeping us out. This is for the community, and you're not above the association. I straightened up, wiping the sweat and dirt off my hands. Morag, I'm only going to say this once. This is my property. Your clan association has nothing to do with this land, and I won't be intimidated by a group of people who can't even read a boundary map. She crossed her arms, smirking. Oh, we'll see about that. I've already spoken to the association president, and we're drafting a formal complaint. You'll be fined, and we'll take legal action if necessary. Fined? I raised an eyebrow, trying not to laugh. You can't fine me, Morag. I don't belong to your association. I don't pay your fees. I don't use your facilities. And I don't follow your rules. You have zero authority here. Her expression hardened. We'll see what the court says. She turned to the others, gesturing like she was commanding an army. Take photos. Document everything. We'll prove this man is unlawfully blocking access to community property. The others began snapping pictures of my cabin, my manor house, even my barn, as if their phone cameras would suddenly rewrite history and property records. I stepped forward, blocking their path. You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll call the constables myself. One of the men muttered, Morag, maybe we should check the records before we. She snapped at him. He's bluffing. I wasn't bluffing. I pulled my phone from my pocket and started dialing. Last chance, Morag. You and your friends have 30 seconds to get off my property before I have the constables out here again. And this time, I'll press charges for trespassing. Her smug look faltered for just a moment. She huffed, waving her hand as though dismissing me. This isn't over. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. With that, she turned on her heel, motioning for the others to leave. They climbed back into their cars, still taking photos as they went, and sped off, leaving a trail of mud and gravel behind them. I stood there, my jaw tight, watching them disappear. This was no longer just a nuisance. It was a campaign. Morag was stirring up the clan association, and if I didn't act fast, they'd try to drown me in false claims and legal threats. I knew her type, loud, stubborn, and willing to twist the truth if it meant getting her way. That night, I drove into town and met with Constable Daniels. He'd been in this county longer than anyone, and he knew every inch of the land. I laid out the situation, from Morag's trespassing to the threat of legal action. Daniels listened, leaning back in his chair with a thoughtful look. She's bluffing, he said finally. The association can't touch your property if you've got the deeds to prove it. But people like Morag thrive on making noise. Best thing you can do is gather all your paperwork and stay ready. If she tries anything, I'll back you up. I appreciate that, Constable, I said. But something tells me she's not going to stop at threats. Daniels nodded. Probably not. Folks like her hate being told no. They think rules are meant for everyone else. But you've got the law on your side. Just keep your cool and don't give her anything she can twist against you. On my way back to the Glen, I couldn't shake the feeling that Morag was planning something bigger. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to find flyers taped to my front gate and mailbox. They read, Community Alert, Man illegally restricts cabin access. Report him. There was even a blurry photo of me standing by the cabin, arms crossed, looking every bit like the villain she wanted to paint me as. I crumpled the flyer, anger simmering in my chest. She wasn't just pushing her luck anymore, she was attacking my name, my home, and everything I had built. If she wanted a war, she had just declared one. The morning I found those flyers, something in me hardened. Morag had crossed the line from being an annoyance to becoming a real threat. Not only was she trespassing and lying, but now she was trying to turn the entire clan association against me. I wasn't about to let her rewrite the truth about my land or the years of blood and sweat I had poured into this estate. I spent the rest of that morning digging through my old files, gathering every scrap of evidence I had. Property deeds, tax records, surveyor maps, receipts for building materials, every document I had from the day I bought this place went into a thick folder. I even found old photographs of me hauling the very stones that made up the cabin walls. If Morag thought she could intimidate me with flyers and legal threats, she was in for a rude awakening. By noon, I was in town, walking straight into the county clerk's office. "Good morning, Fiona," I said to the woman behind the counter. Fiona had worked there for 20 years and knew the history of every property in this county. "I need certified copies of my property deeds and the original survey records for the Glen." Fiona looked up, surprised. "Someone giving you trouble, Sam?" I nodded. "A clan group down the road is trying to claim they have rights to my cabin. They're spreading lies, and I'm not letting it go any further." She raised an eyebrow. "Figures. Those clan folks can get a little high and mighty. Let me pull the records for you." She came back 10 minutes later with a stack of papers, each stamped with the county seal. "This should shut them up," she said, sliding the documents across the counter. "Your property lines are as clear as day. That cabin isn't even close to their jurisdiction." I thanked her and left, feeling a little more confident. On my way home, I stopped by the constable's office to give Daniels an update. I laid the certified documents on his desk. "If Morag or her crew show up again, I want there to be no doubt. This is my land, and they have no claim here." Daniels flipped through the pages and gave a firm nod. "Looks good to me. I'll keep this on file in case they try calling us again." "You want me to have a word with them?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to handle this my way first. But if they set foot on my land again, I'll need you backing me up." That evening, as the sun set and painted the Glen in shades of orange and gold, I walked the perimeter of my property. I reinforced my fences and added a few more private property signs for good measure. Not that signs ever stop someone like Morag, but I wanted everything documented and clear. The next morning, I put my plan into action. I drove down to the visitors center where the clan association offices were located. As I walked through the lobby, a few folks gave me curious looks. Some of them had probably seen Morag's flyers. I didn't care. I asked to speak with the clan association president, a man named Angus, who looked like he'd rather be golfing than dealing with disputes. "Mr. Angus," I said firmly, dropping my folder of documents on his desk. "Your board and one of your members are spreading false claims about my property. This needs to stop now." Angus blinked, clearly taken aback by my tone. "We've received complaints, yes, but Morag, she's hard to deal with." "Morag is lying," I cut in. "Your clan association has zero rights to my land. And I've got county-certified documents to prove it." I opened the folder and laid out the maps and deeds one by one. "Here's the line where your association's land ends. Everything beyond this ridge is mine. Your members are trespassing, and I won't tolerate it." He stared at the documents for a long moment, then sighed. "Look, I don't want trouble. If the land's yours, then we'll put out a statement to the members. But Morag—" "Then make her stop," I said. "Or next time I'll press charges. I'm done playing games." By the time I left that office, Angus had promised to look into it, but I could tell he didn't have the backbone to stand up to Morag. That meant I'd have to do it myself. That night, I drafted my own letter, not just for Morag, but for every member of that clan association. I explained in clear terms that the cabin and the estate were private property, backed by county records. I made it clear that anyone caught trespassing would face legal action. The next morning, I drove through the development and posted copies of the letter on every community board I could find. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to let anyone think I was afraid either. By midday, I started getting phone calls, some from clan members apologizing, others asking me to go easy on Morag. I just told them the truth, respect my land and we won't have a problem. But I knew Morag wouldn't let it go. She was too proud, too stubborn. And sure enough, that evening, I spotted her car parked down the hill, just outside my property line. She was on the phone, pacing like a woman plotting her next move. 2 days after I posted my letter around the Clan Association community boards, I got an unexpected call from the county clerk's office. Fiona's voice was sharp but concerned. "Sam, you might want to know this. Morag and a few folks from the association have requested a town meeting to discuss community access rights. They're dragging your name through the mud." I sighed, setting down my hammer. I'd been fixing the barn door again, trying to keep my hands busy while this storm brewed. "When and where?" "Tomorrow night at the community hall," Fiona said. "And Sam, you'd better bring every document you've got. Morag's telling everyone you've been blocking a public amenity." I thanked her and hung up. This wasn't just a nuisance anymore. Morag was rallying her troops, hoping to use the court of public opinion to twist the truth. But I had something she didn't have: facts, proof, and the will to fight for what was mine. That night, I gathered every piece of evidence I owned. Deeds, survey maps, old receipts, photographs. Every page went into a binder I could carry under my arm. I sat at my kitchen table, looking through each document until I knew them backward and forward. I wasn't just going to show up at that meeting, I was going to end this war once and for all. The following evening, I pulled up to the community hall just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The parking lot was full, more cars than I'd expected. Clearly, Morag had stirred up a storm. I walked in with my binder under my arm, my boots echoing against the polished wood floor. Heads turned as I entered. Some faces looked curious, others skeptical. And there, at the front, stood Morag, already holding court with a smug smile plastered across her face. "There he is," she said loudly, pointing at me as if I were a criminal on trial. "The man who's keeping this community from enjoying what's rightfully ours." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. I stopped in the middle of the room, scanning the faces. "Evening, folks," I said, my voice steady and firm. "I hear there's been some confusion about who owns the cabin up in my glen. I'm here to clear that up once and for all." Morag's smile faltered just a bit, but she quickly recovered. "Confusion? You've been hoarding a resource that the association has every right to use. That cabin was built for this community." "You're wrong," I said sharply, stepping forward. I dropped the binder on the front table with a loud thud. "This cabin was built by me, with my money, on my land. I've got county records and legal deeds that prove it, and I'm tired of hearing lies." I opened the binder, laying out the certified maps and property deeds, each one stamped with the county seal. "Take a good look. This ridge line marks the end of your association's property. Everything beyond it, every inch of the estate, the manor house, and that cabin, is mine. Always has been. Your fees don't maintain it. Your board doesn't control it. You have no claim here." For a moment, the room was silent. Then someone from the back, an older man, stepped forward to look at the documents. "He's right," the man muttered after a few moments. "The maps are clear. The cabin isn't on association land." Morag's face turned crimson. "That can't be true. He's making this up. We've used that area for years." "That doesn't make it yours," I said, locking eyes with her. "Just because you decided to wander onto private property doesn't mean you have the right to stay. I've let folks pass through sometimes out of kindness, but this is my land, and if you or anyone else sets foot there again without permission, I'll have the constables handle it." More murmurs spread through the crowd, this time directed at Morag. People began whispering, clearly realizing she had stirred up trouble without knowing the facts. Someone spoke up, "Morag, did you even check the property lines before making all these claims? Morag's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but she didn't answer. Instead, she crossed her arms and glared at me. This isn't over. We'll take you to court if we have to. I smiled, calm but cold. Do that. I'll bring every document you see here, and I'll win. But if you're smart, you'll walk away now before you waste everyone's time and money. The clan association president, Angus, finally stepped in. His face was pale as he turned to Morag. Morag, I think we need to accept the facts. This property isn't under our jurisdiction. We'll send out a notice to the members tomorrow clarifying this. Morag looked like she might explode, but she said nothing. The crowd began dispersing, most of them shooting me nods of understanding or even quiet apologies as they left. By the time the hall was empty, Morag was gone, her heels clacking angrily against the floor as she stormed out. I walked back to my truck, the cold night air settling over me like a victory. But I knew Morag well enough by now to realize this wasn't the last I'd see of her. She was the kind of person who couldn't stand losing. Still, for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. I had stood my ground, told my side of the story, and let the truth do the talking. The estate was mine, and I wasn't letting anyone take that from me. I thought the town meeting might have put an end to it, but Morag wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. The very next morning, I received a letter delivered by certified mail. Inside was a neatly typed note from a law office in town, threatening legal action for unlawful restriction of community amenities. I laughed out loud when I read it. Morag had clearly hired a lawyer who hadn't bothered to check the facts. Still, I knew better than to ignore it. I gathered all my documents, slipped them into my leather binder, and headed into town to see my own lawyer, Hank Wallace. Hank had been practicing law in this county for over 3 decades, and he knew every land dispute, every property line, and every clan squabble better than anyone else. He looked over Morag's lawyer's letter, smirking as he read. She doesn't have a leg to stand on, Sam. This is nothing more than a scare tactic. I'll draft a response and include copies of all your deeds and county records. We'll shut this down before it even reaches a courtroom. Good, I said, leaning back in the chair. Because I'm done playing games with her. I want her to understand once and for all that she can't bully me. Hank nodded. Oh, she's about to learn that the hard way. I'll also include a warning that if she keeps trespassing or harassing you, we'll file for an injunction and sue her for damages. That usually gets the point across. 2 days later, Hank sent the letter. It wasn't just a polite response, it was a full legal counterstrike. Every page outlined my ownership with official stamps, dates, and signatures. It ended with a stern warning: any further harassment or false claims by the clan association or its members will result in legal consequences. I figured that would do the trick, but Morag wasn't finished. That weekend, I spotted her car parked just down the road, watching my property like a hawk. It was almost dark when I saw her walk up to the cabin fence, phone in hand, taking pictures as if gathering evidence. I walked out quietly, my boots crunching on the gravel. When she saw me, her face froze. Morag, I said, my voice calm but cutting. You're trespassing again, and this time, I'm not warning you twice. She puffed up, defiant. I'm documenting everything for my lawyer. You'll see. This isn't over. Oh, it's over, I said, because right now, I'm calling Constable Daniels, and this time, I'll press charges. I pulled my phone out and started dialing. Her confidence wavered for the first time. You wouldn't dare. I smiled. Try me. She stood there for a moment, glaring, then finally spun on her heel and stormed back to her car. I watched her drive off, mud flying behind her, and I knew I'd just hit her pride harder than ever. But I also knew something she didn't. I had more than legal power on my side. I had proof of something that could truly end this fight. Later that night, I dug through an old metal lockbox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were not just my property documents, but the original contract I signed with the previous landowner. It included a clause stating that the clan association had explicitly relinquished any rights to this glen decades ago, long before Morag ever moved here. I hadn't thought much about it before, but now I saw its value. It wasn't just proof, I could use it as the final nail in the coffin. The next morning, I called Hank and told him about the document. "Bring it in," he said with a chuckle. "We'll make sure Morag's lawyer sees it. She'll have no choice but to back down after this." That afternoon, Hank sent another letter. This one had a copy of the original contract attached. It was undeniable. When Morag got it, I imagined she must have fumed. But this time, there was nothing she could do. No more threats, no more trespassing. I didn't see her car on my road again after that. 2 days later, Angus, the clan association president, called me personally. His voice was almost apologetic. "Sam, I just want to say we're sorry for all this mess. Morag went too far. The board is officially dropping any claims or complaints against you." I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Good. Tell Morag and the rest of your members that if they stay off my land, there won't be any more problems. But if they try something like this again, I won't hesitate to take it to court." Angus sighed. "Understood. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth now." As I hung up the phone, I walked out onto my porch and looked across the glen. The air felt lighter. The sun was setting, painting the cabin and the hills in warm gold, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had my peace back. Morag had tried every trick she knew, but in the end, the truth and hard proof had beaten her. I poured myself a strong cup of tea and sat by the cabin, listening to the quiet sounds of the stream. This was my land, my home, and I wasn't going to let anyone, clan association or otherwise, take it from me. The days following Angus's call felt like a deep breath after a long storm. For the first time in weeks, the glen was quiet again. There were no clan cars pulling up uninvited, no angry voices at the gate, no flyers accusing me of things I didn't do. Just the soft Scottish sun, the smell of pine and peat, and the sound of the wind rolling softly through the hills. I spent the morning walking the perimeter of my land, checking the stone walls the way I always did. Everything felt still, as if the glen itself was letting me know that the fight was over. When I reached the cabin, I stopped to admire it. The stone walls were warm from the heat of the day. This cabin wasn't just a place to live, it was my reward for years of hard labor, hauling stone, mixing mortar, and fighting the elements to build something worth keeping. Morag's battle had taught me something I didn't realize I needed to learn again, the value of standing my ground, not just for property, but for principle. She had tried everything, intimidation, lies, even legal threats. But in the end, the truth had cut through it all. And truth, I knew, was something that couldn't be shaken by noise or arrogance. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun began to dip low, painting the glen in shades of orange and deep red. I sipped a glass of cold water and thought back to the start of all this. It was almost laughable now. One woman thinking she had the right to take what wasn't hers simply because she was loud enough to call the police. She had no idea that the man she was yelling at owned not just the cabin, but every inch of this valley for miles. I could have let anger eat at me. But instead, I felt something different, a kind of peace. I had won, not by shouting, but by standing firm, by letting the work of my hands and the proof of my record speak louder than her tantrums. I'd protected not just the land, but the quiet life I'd built here. And that meant more to me than any argument. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, I saw an older couple from the clan association standing there, looking sheepish. "We just wanted to apologize," the man said, holding his hat in his hands. "We didn't know the whole story. Morag, well, she has a way of convincing people, but we realize now this land is yours, and we're sorry for any trouble we caused." I smiled, shaking his hand. "No harm done, as long as it stops here. I'm not against anyone. I just want my property respected." They nodded and left, and I watched them go, feeling a sense of closure. It wasn't about grudges or revenge. It was about drawing a line and holding it when someone tried to push past it. That night, I lit a small fire by the cabin and sat on the deck, listening to the quiet hum of the stream. The stars were so clear you could almost count them, each one glowing above the dark ridge line. I thought about all the years I'd spent building this place, the long days when the rain felt like it would soak me to the bone, and the cold nights when I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But now, with the cabin reflecting the starlight and the glen resting calm around me, I knew I'd built something worth defending. I took a slow breath, letting it all settle in. Life out here isn't easy. It's not about clan rules or manicured lawns or board meetings. It's about grit, patience, and the determination to make something out of nothing. And when someone tries to take that away, you have to be ready to stand like a mountain. As the fire crackled, I thought about what I'd tell anyone watching this story unfold. Don't let people like Morag push you around. If you know what's yours, protect it. If you've worked for something, stand by it. The glen grew darker, and I felt content in a way I hadn't in weeks. This was my home, my sanctuary, and nothing, not even the loudest clan tourist, was going to change that. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about land. It's about dignity, about knowing that hard work and truth will always outshine noise and lies.